Well, hi, good evening, afternoon, morning. My name is Alana M here with PMO Global. Here with our one of our finalists for the PMO Global Finalist of the Year. And so I'm so excited to be here with you, Fatima, to just talk about project management and the PMO and just wanting to say hi. So I'm going to give you a minute you can say hi.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you enjoy our session today. Looking forward to sharing more insights.
All right, awesome. Thank you. This is also our quick opportunity to warm up our vocal cords as we are cross continents. And I get a kick out of the fact that Fatima's on the continent that I haven't had a chance to visit yet. So I have every intent of coming next year. So maybe we'll have an opportunity to meet face to face. But look forward to our conversation and our time together. So I'll start with that real quick. So you're in Australia. So where, aside from, of course, you love the Down Under, but where's another place that you love? Where would you be if you weren't there?
Honestly, a couple of years ago we went to Hawaii, and that was my introduction to the US. I haven't been to mainland US, so I would probably go back to Hawaii because we just absolutely loved it. And I'm not a swimmer, I can't swim, but the beach there just made me want to be in the water as much as I possibly could, and spent most of the time in the water. So I'd love to go back to Hawaii. And the second favorite I'd probably say is Japan. I've been to Japan and just absolutely loved everything about it. So hopefully I get to go there, but obviously we'll have to wait until the travel restrictions lift. So hopefully that's not too far away.
Hopefully. I know many of us are kind of in that mode where we're beginning to kind of pick a spot on the map where we would go, because there's got to be light at the end of the tunnel. But speaking of light at the end of the tunnel, I mean, we both share this passion for, for helping organizations change and realize what that new future might look like. You've had a unique approach to that, and I had a chance to take a look at some of the work that you've been doing. Let's start off. I really want to get right into this Agile Management Office. What is that? Tell me about that.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for asking. So I have invested probably the last 5 or 6 years in and around the Agile Management Office concept. It came to head as a result of many years' experience within corporate environments where there was some really traditional, outdated ways of doing things when it came to project management offices that I felt was particularly rife in large corporate businesses. And so going from organization to organization, I was sort of applying my own unique way of working that I thought at the time was just everything that everybody does. But what I ended up finding is that time and time again, I was applying a particular approach, a particular method, and getting really good results. So then I decided early on, probably about 2015, 2016, that if I could take the approach that I was using and share that with my team or with other people, and they could apply that, would that in fact generate the same results? And so this is where Agile Management Office actually came to head. And it's about taking a view of things around governance that is not focused on a project management delivery methodology, because project management has its own myriad of delivery methodologies, and therefore project management. There hasn't been that many out there that are specific and exclusive to the project management office. Mm-hmm. So when we kind of started, we set up Agile Management Office to defy the one-size-fits-all approaches. And effectively, the AMO as a concept is a practice that is a conduit to enable and monitor successful delivery, but not just in project delivery, but also integrate with the enterprise level and then also into operations. So if you think of it as a triangle, you've got enterprise, you've got project delivery, and then you've got the operations, and the AMO is a conduit that sits in between that. So there's a kind of a lot of different elements that we add into it, from Agile and Lean principles as well as others, but really has been about trying to address problems that exist in project management offices and putting together an approach that makes it more effective moving forward. And we've been testing that concept quite a lot, which I can share more about. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavor for what it is.
That does, and I think that's great insight for our listeners as well. So one of the things, there were a couple of things that you were saying that I just really was holding on to. For one, when you were drawing the triangle and how things intersect and work together effectively, which is the goal of any PMO, is bringing people together. So there's governance, but there's this really key component of engagement. What have you found in your experience has been a key to engagement in what the PMO is doing? So how do you engage others in those activities?
Yeah, really good questions. In the global white paper that I released at the end of last year, I talk about organizational misalignment and delivery disconnect and other things around stakeholder management. I think the problem is, and I've been one of those people that was running a PMO that actually did approach it in this way, and I don't think it's the right way, where you get the opportunity to run a function, whether it's an enterprise PMO, portfolio PMO, or whatever that may be. And often we think as PMO managers that the way that we want to run it, or the way we ran it at the company we just came from, is the right way. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned through time is that's actually not the case, that every environment, the maturity, the capability of an organization as a whole, the people that you're working with, they're all different. So you need to take a kind of a clean, fresh look at it as you move forward. So two of the key things that we focus on completely is, one of them, every single AMO practice or organization we work with, where we bring in the AMO concept, is we start and end with the executive. Because executives have been known for many decades not to support, for the most part, the PMOs, particularly if you're not at the enterprise level. You get very little support, and they're one of the first functions to go. So that's number one. And then the second one, which is a really key part of it, is we co-design everything with our stakeholders. And that's a really key part of the AMO method. It's about working with stakeholders, understanding their needs, learning about them and their environment before making any new changes or putting any new processes. And so the AMO method enables us to do that.
Great. And I definitely love the concept when you were talking about co-designing, because there's no better way to get buy-in and ownership with your stakeholders than to have them at the table, to have them giving that input. That's a great, not just a great languaging about it, but it's a great best practice to have. And I hope that those who are watching this take that away and realize, maybe kind of step back and go, am I handing the design over? Or am I engaging them in the design, therefore making them co-creators of something great and new? You touched on something that I was going to even ask about, but I love that you had the foresight to add that, and that is about the executive buy-in, because so many times it can fail at that level because it doesn't have the appropriate executive buy-in, and because it needs to be an additional function. That's great. So I just wanted to highlight that in case anybody missed that great nugget. Wanted to make sure they got that, but. No, I've really enjoyed kind of getting to know some more about you and your background. And I want to help make sure that our audience kind of has some of that insight, that not only that I've read, but that they can hear some things from you. I know you've done a lot of things to uplift culture and engagement. What you were telling me about this engagement that you were on recently, where you had amazing results. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, in sort of 2016, it started the journey of the whole Agile Management Office concept. And I think if you Google, I don't think there was anyone else talking about it. So I really wanted to attempt to apply it and actually do that with experience on client sites and get their feedback. So we did that. But it came to probably about the sort of late 2018. So a couple of years later, we had some really good progress. And one of the executives that I've dealt with at many other companies actually invited us to come in and help her, as they had basically Australia's second largest supermarket chain, and they're absolutely massive. And what they were doing is they had demerged from a really big, larger parent company. And what that ended up meaning is, as a result of demerging from this larger company, they now have to reset foundations within the individual company itself. And we're talking about new governance frameworks, new ways of working, new operating models, new structures, everything you can think of. And so it was really important for them to have some really good, solid foundations. And that's why they engaged us to come in. So in that particular engagement, we were able to provide that client an end-to-end application of the Agile Management Office method, from absolute start to finish, the way I'd envisaged and dreamed it. A lot of companies, we've applied parts of it, but this one, we've able to do it start to end. So what that ended up meaning is, as a result of the work and the approach that we took, over the sort of 1.5 to 2 years period that we actually worked with them, we were able to take their maturity up by 2 levels to a sort of a level 2 CMMI level, from pretty much a 0 or 1 in this area. And then what we did is, because we co-collaborated with their teams and we involved them, and throughout the AMO method, it's about bringing people in, we ended up having a third of this function involved in the project, which is unheard of. When you think about PMOs, they don't really get much involvement from other people. It's really about the PMO lead and their team. But we went the other way and involved them in the design and whatnot. So as a result of that, and in the midst of COVID earlier this year, where we concluded our engagement, we ended up reassessing them, both the NPS scores for the way that they engage with brands, and project management has a big part to play in that. And then the employee engagement scores as well were reassessed. And so in the time that we were there and helping them to the time that we had just left, they reassessed and found that engagement in that team had gone up by 15%. And we have weekly pulse check surveys to also align to that record. So our executive called us and said, like, this is thank you to you guys, because we got these results, and that was one of her key performance indicators for her. So it was an absolutely amazing result, and it was mid-COVID that we actually concluded that project. So it's probably one of my proudest achievements in Agile Management Office to date.
Great. Oh, that sounds like a great engagement, and the fact and the way that you even defined your measurables. I mean, that was a key part of that for them to be able to even go back and evaluate that. So that's really good. I mean, I think that's something that as we were chatting a little earlier, and as consultants, we know we have to, as consultants and as project managers, we have to justify our work, and not for ourselves, but so that our clients know that they have this quantifiable measure of the value of what just happened in that engagement. And PMOs do that in general, but then each time we have an opportunity to engage with a client, we have a chance to even remind them of how to make that part of their own culture and how to make that part of their own practices.
Absolutely. And I think you're right, Alana. A lot of the time there may be, and honestly, I haven't seen that many, but there may be some PMOs that are really good at measuring and providing tangible results and whatnot. Personally, and maybe it's an Australian thing, I'm not really sure, but I haven't really seen it. And to be honest, prior to really learning more about doing that, I didn't really do it myself. And so I think there's a gap there, but also an opportunity for PMOs to work out how to measure their success. Because if you can prove yourself very valuable to your environment, whether it's your project management community or your enterprise executives, etc., you're more likely going to, be able to last the length of time. So I guess the key thing for me around measurements and whatnot is, in order to prove the concept and the method and the approach and everything that we're trying to set out in our business and what we've been trying to do, well, we have to have some sort of measurables. So we utilized 3. We used the NPS, the employee engagement, and then we ran our own. And we ended up finding that out of 10 stars, if you like, the feedback we got was there was almost a 9 out of 10 who agreed that collaboration and engagement in their area uplifted significantly, and that they would not have been able to do what they did if it wasn't for our involvement. And I put that down to the approach that we took, which we're now taking in other organizations as well.
Awesome. And you touched on such a key word and such a key point in our industry, and that's collaboration, and how important it is that we include a variety of voices. One thing I want to mention in the context of collaboration, and one of the things I was so excited in preparation of this is, we understand this is a global community. I'm in the States. I'm calling in from Houston, hailing from Houston, Texas. I don't know why I put that in air quotes. Because I'm outside of Houston, but still, okay. And you're in Australia, but here we are. One of the first commonalities that I recognize is that we're both women of color. And yes. So here we are in a year where there have been incredible amounts of conversation around, inclusion and how important that is. And I always love reminding leaders of how collaboration can't take place without inclusion, because you otherwise exclude voices and people from input, from decisions, from organizational cultural change. So it's not lost on me, and I hope that it's not lost on those who are watching, that that not only is that a landscape change that we see in our industry. I've been a practitioner for almost 20 years now, and so I've enjoyed kind of watching the landscape change, going from being maybe the only woman of color in a room to looking around and going, that's great, because what that does is that shows that our industry, the industry that we love so dearly, has opened their arms more and has been inclusive. So that's an awesome point. But from a business standpoint, that leads to collaboration, and so that's one of the things that we always remember. Well, speaking of I'd say bringing different ideas together. I mean, you're a multifaceted woman. So not only are you passionate about Agile and project management office, but you also have an amazing passion in university. I see that you're on an advisor or lecturer at a university. Can you tell us a little bit about like what you teach? And I'd love to hear an interesting story with you and a student.
Yeah, so no problem. Thanks for asking. So I've been sort of going back and forth and speaking to Aarhus University in Denmark, which is, for those who don't know, is the top 75 university in the world, and been sort of toying with the idea. I guess lectured there in about 2014 live in Denmark when I was in my Europe trip, which was amazing, by the way, and ended up continuing to have conversations with the professor there who runs the international project management and a number of other number of other areas within the university, including like the heritage space, international project management, and others. So he's got a lot of Masters of International Studies students. And so we continued the conversation, and we would constantly talk about the fact that there is all this amazing academic knowledge that's being taught, and he being one of those exceptional teachers. But there was a missing link for students, and that was around the sort of practice side of it, the corporate side. You can do your project management learnings and education and then not really know how to apply it because you've not had that experience. So that was a key sort of conversational starter. When we moved forward to 2016, 2017, then we continued further conversation around maybe we could do something with this. And I was trying to prove the AMO method concept, not only in practice in corporate, but I wanted to test it with, maybe we could try this with international project management students who are new to project management and see if they could apply some of the AMO method principles and concepts and see what result they would get. So in 2019, we partnered. We formally created a partnership between the university and Agile Management Office. And then we agreed to use one of the semesters, which was a bunch of 30 plus students who became part of the program. I then was involved in guest lecturing a number of different areas, from stakeholder management, communications, and AMO method principles. And we, as a business, set up a temporary project, if you like, for these students. And we set up this group, these different groups of 5, and gave them certain activities and tasks. So while they were learning the theory, we were teaching them the practice. And what ended up happening as a result of that, not only were the students very, very happy, and we had them blog throughout and again pulse check how they were feeling, but as a result of that program, one of the students was so happy with the results that she'd seen, she actually applied to do an internship with us, and then has joined us in the last couple of months and is doing a fantastic job. And so we're just continuing that partnership, and we're able to prove that the methodology itself works with entry-level students, and then now incorporate with practitioners like you and I.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And I love that when you point out that missing link, that is definitely the miss between, academia and, and our actual corporate practices is, what does this really look like? How do you really put this into practice? What is the practical application of this? It goes certainly beyond teaching somebody, different points of project management, helping them memorize and even understand points of the PMBOK. It goes beyond that. So kudos to you for bridging that gap and having that. Okay, but so I want to hear. Okay, maybe because I love people that work with college age students. What was one of the last requests that you had from a student that how do I apply this? What might a question look like?
Yeah, it's interesting because they all have different study paths. So some of them are in the arts, some of them are purely focused on the business side. So they all have different takes and where they're applying it. Some students were, how does this program or project apply to me? And project management's only 10% of my course. I actually just don't think I need to know it. So it was really about helping them understand, and we really simplified it to say, project management applies to almost everything. If you end up getting married, that's a project. You have a baby, that's a project, and so forth. So we really tailored sort of the experience so that they can then relate to it. But some of the interesting sort of elements of it were around students trying to understand that if they were going to be in a particular industry, do they need to know a specific project methodology in that industry? And then if they move to another industry, do they have to learn and apply something different? many of these students actually move on to work at the UN and the World Health Organization, etc. So their experiences around like the not-for-profit sector and actually working in sort of the community. So they wanted to understand how corporate consulting, project management world, where, you know, you've got all your big consulting companies and how they apply, if that differed from not-for-profit. And so I sort of wanted to share with them the elements of that, the fact that, you know, in a not-for-profit, it really is not about profit. It's not about, and the investments and the benefits management and all that sort of stuff is treated a bit different to a company that is for-profit. So they were really fascinated with the different approaches and how you can apply them. And then also with the rise of Agile, how that then comes into the traditional methods that they've heard about, be it PMO or Prince2, etc.
Awesome. I mean, one of the things that you were saying too, you know, project management in the not-for-profit, kind of that project management for the greater good. So a reminder that, and I always tell my students that project management is this amazing set of luggage, and I let them, you know, imagine that they have Louis Vuitton luggage, right? Something really expensive and really fancy. But the great thing about it is you take it with you wherever you go. So it's an essential set of skills that you take with you wherever you go and apply in a variety of ways. And maybe I need this big suitcase, maybe I need this small one, maybe I just need the tote, the backpack, right? So it's adaptable, like a great set of luggage, and it looks really good.
Yes, especially if it's Louis Vuitton. I actually really like that example. Maybe I can convince my husband to let me get a set of Louis Vuitton bags so that I can use it for explaining that to people when they ask me, what do you do?
Good point, because it's funny that I mentioned this reference, but I have nothing close to Louis Vuitton luggage, but I think you've just helped me justify that purchase. And I think that's, yes, I hope nobody is listening. But
good investment, I'm sure.
Yes, it is an investment because I need it as a visual aid for my students, and especially now with a lot more of the online learning, that being exciting, because all I have to do is run down the hall, get it, show it to them, and take it back.
Exactly.
So, so speaking of, so in the online world, so because here we are still smack dab in the middle of COVID, and we all thought we'd be out of this by now. I mean, so many of us try to futurize our way out of this by now. But how have you seen COVID serve as an example to the benefit of AMO?
It's actually been quite interesting. We did have a couple of projects that went on hold. Health and fitness industry, obviously, or the gyms closed down. So those sorts of projects paused. But what it did is actually, I think it created some really big opportunities because, as I mentioned, we were doing work with Australia's second largest supermarket, and supermarkets are an essential service in COVID and was one of the very few places that remained open. So despite that, being also remote and everybody having to learn how to use the online, you know, even though people assume that everyone knows how to use Zoom and other products, it's not the case if you're not used to it. And so we were able to do that with them. And what it actually taught them, and then other clients as well, is for the first time, I think, in our life, and Alana, I don't know if you would agree with this, but as consultants, you're expected to be there on site all the time. So actually having an opportunity to prove value, demonstrate outputs and actually results, and being completely remote, it's created such an opportunity for consulting moving forward. And I was just literally yesterday talking to a company about helping them out for a program of work that's actually interstate, and knowing that I'm in Melbourne wasn't an issue anymore, but that would have been an issue 6 months ago. So it's actually created a lot of opportunity, and also saves me a lot of commuting time.
No, I agree, and I love that, and I've joked with people that well, despite the horrific disease, and I certainly don't downplay the disease at all, but our COVID lifestyle is very similar to the lifestyle that I've lived for several years, because I've been a work from home, you know, global consultant, so my clients could be anywhere. But there were times where I found that to be a bit of a tough sell. I mean, I was still insistent, but sometimes it was a tough sell. Now it's not so much. And for so many even project managers and some of our other project delivery professionals, they're seeing now that some of the remote benefits that they were trying to encourage their employers to understand, well, now they're going to have a hard time going back, taking that back. I mean, and so I see a hybrid going forward, and I see there being more advantage in disruptors like me who were working from home before working from home was cool.
100%. Even the travel side of it, companies are going to save inordinate amounts of travel costs, especially where they hire consultants or even their own staff. I know a lot of permanent employees that no longer have to travel. And then there's the other side of the coin as well, where I heard recently through an interview on our podcast that there was in New York, I think they said they've worked out that there's $14,000 saving per annum per employee that's not going into the office. Now, I don't know how accurate that number is, but that 14,000 per employee, times that by the number of employees, there's a real big opportunity for companies right now to significantly shift the dial on culture and engagement for their companies moving forward as a result of savings they're making on the other side. So it's just about what companies do with that. And I think they've got a real big opportunity to change that dial. And I think PMOs can have a lot to play in that if they're smart about it, and really can support the companies in that objective.
Yeah, well, those are some great suggestions too that I hope that some executives are beginning to pin on their wall and start to think about, because we'll be in this mode for a while, but then even as we transition out, just really continuing to understand how to leverage those opportunities. I think that's really going to be key. So it's something. So I wanted to ask you about your podcast. You just mentioned something that had come up on your podcast. So I have it. Oh, Agile Ideas. That's what it is. So the Agile Ideas podcast. So what has been one of your favorite episodes? Give me your top 3, maybe.
Well, that's a bit hard. It's like trying to pick between children.
Oh no.
No, that's okay. Look, I think if I just mention that prior to probably last year, there was predominantly it was just me sharing insights and stories and experiences. But we started interviewing guests in the last 12 months, and it's been an incredible opportunity. One of the ones that really stands out for me was probably the first guest interview, and it was a lovely gentleman who was the chief marketing officer at a not-for-profit organization called the Lion's Share. And the Lion's Share is a really important initiative that it's backed by Sir Richard Branson. It's a UN global initiative. It's actually about anyone using animals in their marketing and advertising, especially the bigger companies, actually about contributing and donating a very small percentage of their marketing budgets to animal wildlife prospects, which is what the Lion's Share is all about. So that was one of the ones that really stood out. And I actually didn't realize how many companies use animals in their marketing, but there's a lot of big brands on board now that are part of the initiative and actually supporting it, such as Mars, for example, which is a global giant. So that was one of the ones that really stood out. The second one that really was a big changing point for us is we've interviewed the founder and CEO at a company, not-for-profit called Just One Tree, which, as the name represents, their vision is that for £1, they're a UK-based company, that they can plant one tree through their reforestation partners. And the amount one tree can make in the environment is more than I ever possibly could have known. And so really just learning and hearing Amanda Bronkhorst's story and how she's gone about it, being an entrepreneur, starting up in business. Within, I think, the first year, they planted over 750,000 trees in 1 year through donations. So that one was so touching for me and her story, and really wanted to help her out. So we became the first Australian partner for them. And now with every engagement, every placement we do, and every consulting engagement, we donate funds to Just One Tree so they can continue to help the environment. So our small part to play. And then the third one would probably have to be the university professor, which we haven't released yet, but it will come out in a couple of weeks, where we actually spent usually about 30 minutes talking in an interview, but it actually went for over 2 hours. So the professor at the university at Aarhus that I'm partnered with, we ended up getting on a call and having a conversation that lasted over 2 hours about everything from the resource minerals environment, project management, Deepwater Horizon stories, and then even about our engagement and what results the students saw. So it was a very engaging, energetic conversation that I absolutely loved, and looking forward to sharing that in a couple of weeks.
Great. That is awesome. And well, I loved your first response. Well, it's like choosing children. So because I can imagine the amount of just of love and passion for your baby. Anyone that I know that has a podcast, I mean, it's a baby. So I didn't mean to put you on the spot and make you choose a baby, but you did an amazing job. And one of the things that I wanted to point out that was so, to me, obvious is that the ones that really resonated with you are the ones that are having such a great social impact. And so we can see really the importance of our day-to-day work having such a larger impact, and some, it's impacting and affecting things that are just so much greater than us. And
Yeah,
one of the things
absolutely.
that I know I'm incredibly passionate about is helping people understand purpose, and even organizations driving purpose and understanding social impact and global impact and stewardship and all of those great things. So it's great to hear how much work that you do directly with nonprofits, and even how indirectly they get to benefit from your work and from your expertise. So that's awesome. That was not lost on me.
And I'm glad you say that, because it really is educational. Agile ideas is about thinking differently and acting differently. So these examples I've just given are things that I came across via LinkedIn or referrals from other people that are truly agile ideas. They're thinking outside the box. They're doing something that's really unique and different. And that's why I wanted to talk to them. So that's really the essence. But at the same time, it's educational for me. And if there's a small part to play, and we're a tiny cog in this big wheel that is the world, and it means that we can help, the environment or do something like that. I mean, it's the least that, I can do or the company can do. So yeah, we're really passionate about it. And I honestly don't know. My mother used to say when I was little that I could talk underwater, and that I'm going to grow up doing something like talking. She thought I was going to be a horse racing commentator, because I used to talk quite fast, but I've learned to slow down a little bit. So I figured when the podcast started a couple of years ago, it was my husband who actually convinced me to get on board and do it. And I'm grateful that he did.
Well, good. Well, and I'm grateful that he did, because Agile Ideas, that's a great podcast, and I look forward to listening to more of the episodes. So you mentioned and I certainly wanted to touch on this, not just it was on your profile, but even in our time together, I can see how great you would be engaging an audience. I wanted to talk to you, but shift gears just a little bit and talk to you about speaking, and what you bring to audiences when you speak. What would you say is your favorite topic, for one? But what are some of your favorite audiences?
It's a really interesting question, and I think there's a kind of a mixed answer, because I didn't know really how to speak, many years ago, and I ended up volunteering with Beyond Blue, which is Australia's largest mental health organisation, which I'm sure we'll touch on later. But I did that for a couple of reasons. One, around reducing the stigma associated with mental health, and then two, to also practice and experience speaking. So with them, before I started doing any corporate speaking, I did a lot of talks on mental health to probably now over 50, I would say, organizations, not-for-profits, homeless shelter, you name it, and sort of they've sent me out to speak and volunteer there. So that, I'd have to say, is my absolute favorite type of talking, mental health and resilience and whatnot, because of my own personal experiences in mental health, my family's experiences, and other people that I know. So I feel like when I do those talks, it generates enough inspiration to not force, but help people take action. And I've actually had follow-up calls or emails and things from people who have said, because of this, I did that, or because of, something you said, I resonated. And I remember one of my most powerful talks was actually with Qantas. Qantas invited me to speak a few years ago as a result of some personal things that had happened within the organisation with some of their staff. And then a year later, I came back to speak for the same group, but there was a few different people in the room. And I remember one gentleman actually started crying towards the end and said, "Thank you, because since your last presentation, I ended up convincing his wife," he said, who was suffering from bulimia, and helped her to speak up. And now she's actually on a road to recovery. So within that 12 months, as a result of the sort of some of the guidance and advice and feedback and the story that I shared, which is quite personal, he then was able to help his wife, who was on the mend. So to be honest, they're my absolute favorite talks, because I feel like I can talk from experience and from passion, and it's my story, so it's unique to me. And then second to that, I've been running a couple of meetup groups, one for project management for small business and one called Agile Ideas, coincidentally. And although I love talking about PMO and project management and women in project management and things like that, when I talk to small businesses, because I am a small business, I feel like taking those big consulting lessons, the project management, the training, all the things we learn in big corporate companies, and transposing that into bite-sized chunks for small businesses, because they don't have that experience. A lot of them don't come from, corporate world, so they actually don't know how tenders work and vendor management and all of that. So I really love sharing my insights and stories there, because I've had failures and lessons in business as well as some success. So I want to kind of relay that back to them. So they're probably my top two.
Awesome. I feel like I should give a note to the producer to add our little continents differently, but put a little equal sign, because the more I hear you speak, the more I feel like we're just so similar people, just on different continents. Incredibly passionate about, that heartfelt work. And as you were talking about taking those corporate nuggets, I tell small businesses, you don't have to have a Fortune 500 business to have some of the Fortune 500 insights, and giving those nuggets and knowing that that's helping uplift those small businesses. So I share that with you, and I think that is a great value add when we study project management, and when we learn to apply it in different ways and give value to other people. And so you certainly model that, and so that's great. That's a great way of doing that. So one of the things that you mentioned as you were talking about that was so let's, if you don't mind, when I want to touch on this passionate topic that you were talking about this mental health organization that you've been serving. Was there something? I just want to open the floor to you to share what you choose to share where that's concerned.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. So growing up in the sort of, just for background, I grew up in a large family. There's 8 of us, 6 kids. I was the middle girl, and my parents were migrants from Lebanon. And my family, growing up, they were very strict Islamic sort of upbringing, because particularly my mum was quite strict. She still is. But so I kind of grew up in a really sort of sheltered environment, and we didn't have much money, so we were always trying to do things to entertain ourselves together and find things to do that were fun. Like my first project was creating a backyard garden cafe of muds and sticks and rocks and stones, and selling to the cousins and things like that. But sorry, I divest. But so anyway, the kind of whole concept of the mental health and my passion about it was a couple of things. One of them, there is a significant portion of my family that has anxiety or depression, or both, whether it's been postnatal depression or sort of generalized anxiety, etc. So in my probably when I was in my early 20s, I for the first time got hit by the anxiety bus. Didn't know what it was. Didn't even know what that word meant. Everyone usually thinks anxiety is the nerves you get when you public speak, and that's not a disorder. That's just general anxiety symptoms. And so I went through many years of corporate, and it got to a point where I realized that I was hiding the fact that I had anxiety. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't want my new boss to know, or any companies I worked at. As a contractor, I was going between companies every year or two. And I felt like I couldn't say anything, because the stigma associated with mental health was so powerful that it actually made me scared to speak up or say anything. And it got to a point where about 6 years ago, just before I joined Beyond Blue, I thought, you know what, I've gotten to a point, I've worked over 10 years in corporate, and if I speak up now and it may help someone, if there's an organization out there that doesn't want to hire me because I've had anxiety or I have anxiety, even though it has not affected my day-to-day work, and I think I've only ever had 1 or 2 sick days, then that's their loss, and I'm not going to care anymore. And I decided that at that point in time, I would go and share my personal story, which is a lot more detailed. It would probably take twice the time that we're talking now to share. And I did that with Beyond Blue, which is the most recognizable mental health organization in the country. And then, so since joining them, I started volunteering and telling my story, and they help to make sure that you craft your story in a way that is in the right sort of layout and format that helps people understand. So I learned how to write, the story and the speech, and then rehearse it and memorize it. But then I change it now depending on the audience. So that was kind of a really big point. And at that point in time, probably a couple of years into that engagement, to that volunteering work, I'm still with them today, I got asked to interview for one of Australia's largest newspapers. And I was like, if I do this, it's probably going to make or break my career, and it's probably going to be a really big, and I was so scared. But then when it published, the next day I just received an outpour of, oh, you're brave and this and that. And I don't think I'm that brave, but just all these feedback, and actually still went to work and still got jobs and still got contracts, and nothing bad happened. So that's kind of where I feel like through these experiences, I'm learning from the audience and then sharing my insights. So like I said, I could talk about this for hours, and I'm sure we don't have that long. So hopefully that's been helpful.
That is, and that's beautiful. That, for one, I'm so grateful that that was the result. But it's beautiful that internally you thought it would be something else, and it wasn't. And so, but then you have a chance to share that now. So for anybody else that's holding back, sharing their story, whatever that story might be, that may benefit someone, that they don't hold back because the rug may get pulled out from under them. So I think that's a great addition to your story, and I thank you for sharing that, and just your story in general. Excuse me. I think the more we can share our experiences, both professional, as how to manage projects better, or how to establish a PMO better. But the reality is, we bring our whole selves to work, so it's really helpful, I think, when people can see, again, with women in project management, because there are additional stressors on women that are, there are some differences in our interpersonal dynamics in the workplace. And so the more we can encourage one another through the sharing of, even though, hit by the anxiety bus, I want to borrow your language, that was a very colorful phrasing there, but how you were still able to perform effectively. But it also reminds people that, because I too had something similar, but it reminds people that, behind that successful, helpful project manager is somebody that is struggling with something.
Yeah.
And so it's so freeing when our colleagues and our cohorts can understand that, because one of the things that I love about project management is it's an opportunity, a daily opportunity, to help people work together for common goals. The operative thing there is people, and people are complicated and messy, and and they have all these things. And so the more stigmas we can help people remove, the better. The more we can humanize one another, the more we can work together effectively. So I thank you for sharing that story, and I thank you for the fact that you just shared that. You just gave some other people courage to share their story, because I remember when I came forward and shared parts of my story, when I published my memoir in 2016, and that actually was so I published my first book in 2012, a follow-up in 2016. Collectively, they told my story, because I felt like my story is too big to put in one book, so it needed two, just those different parts of it. But when we share that humanity of us, one of the things that I was surprised, like you, I presented at a PMI conference, and I wove some of that in, because even though I was talking about leadership, I was like, let me just see. Let me see. And like you, I was amazed at the outpouring afterwards in email, and even people that approached me, after the talk, thanking me for expressing. And part of what I was sharing was losing my son to cancer, and the feelings of depression, and just how hurtful that is, and how life-changing it all is, even all the circumstances leading up to it. But how we, in most cases, have to, because working is not an option in most cases, but how we have to still, in the old expression, put our pantyhose on. I haven't worn pantyhose in a while, but put our pantyhose on and get to work. Of still having to be, still having to perform well, and performing well even in the midst of extenuating and sometimes gut-wrenching circumstances. But what it reminds us as project leaders is that when we look around, people on our teams are going through things too. So the more work that we do to remove the stigmas behind that, so again, hats off to you for that, and continuing that, not just in the volunteer work, but how we even weave that in, as we talk about culture change, and we talk about, I think one of the things when we talk about opportunities coming out of COVID is there's been so much more talk about emotional intelligence and empathy, and how important that is, because we were kind of realizing, well, the person that we're working with, they're dealing with unprecedented times, right? We've heard that so many times. Well, many people have had 2020s, which is this really horrific year. They've had before, right? So it's the humanitarian reminder for us as project leaders that is so important, that is so helpful for us to understand in those leadership roles. So what is one of the things as we continue on our discussion, and while the mental health and the collaboration that is required in our groups of really getting to know the human element of people, what have you found has been what is a way that you use to break through, like when you enter into an organization? What are some of the things that you do to kind of establish not just team building, but to really kind of kick off? Do you have any unique ways that you kick off an engagement to create that engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, thank you for sharing that personal story. I really appreciate it. And it just definitely humanizes everything that everyone says, because we're all going through something. So, part of the AMO method is the consistency, the coordination, and the collaboration. They're the three key C's, the three C's as I call them. And communication is essential from start to finish. So there's a couple of things that we definitely do. One of them, we start off every engagement with an engagement success check, which is basically going through a series of steps to align exactly what the expected outcomes are of the engagement, how it's going to work, how we're going to meet, how we're going to talk, all of the sorts of things that if you don't get those sort of ratified at the beginning with your client and with the executives, then you're probably going to suffer down the rabbit hole when you go down different paths. But one of the things that's really interesting for us, and what I've seen personally, is one of the biggest contributors to my personal success in PMO and even in business is just listening to people and asking questions that gives them an opportunity to open up. By being pretty open myself, it means that they open up more. And what I found that's been really interesting, one of the sort of techniques that we apply, and a big part of the method is capturing the pain points and the challenges and the problems and the opportunities and the observations from the people we're speaking to. And we try to speak to as many people as possible in any new engagement, and then demonstrating to them exactly how their feedback, their ideas, their suggestions, their problems are being applied, are being project managed to completion, are being resolved. We do that anonymously, so we don't capture people's feedback and then go to the executive, because the executive is paying us, who's this project sponsor, and say, look, Alana said so-and-so about this, and I think, you could either fix it or ignore her. No, we don't do that. So we build trust with our, with the practitioners, the project managers, the contractors, the business analysts, etc. And then we build a trust and reputation with the executive by saying, well, I know you're paying us, but we're not going to tell you who said what. We're going to capture it and then give you a plan to address a lot of those moving forward. So doing that and demonstrating progress for the people that have provided that insight and input is super powerful. And that has been one of the biggest contributors to my personal success and as a business as well. So that'll be one of the big things. And then communication, probably the other one I would say is high levels of communication. So more frequently communicating, and then in the ways that people would like to be communicated to. And you can find that out by asking people as well.
Yeah. Great. Absolutely. Key communication points. And I wanted to ask you that for anyone who's watching that's aspiring to be a consultant, but also people that are on the other side of the table, so that they know what to expect of a consultant coming into their organization, and how that mutual understanding can work. Because a lot of what you just listed, while certainly a methodology that you use, is definitely a consistent approach, right? Of listening first, and then that confidentiality being so important, and having them address what went wrong, not who went wrong. Kind of one of my favorite little expressions there. We don't want to go after people; we want to go after issues.
Exactly.
And so that's a great point to mention, especially as you're building that relationship with the new client coming in. And so for anyone who's watching that is on the receiving end of a consultant coming in, understand that that's one of the first things that's happening, is this creation of trust. And anyone who is a consultant and they're part of this PMO Global event, and they're watching this, is I just want to I almost want to say, I want to beg you, please make that a practice that you do of establishing trust in the beginning, because one of the neat things about our profession is that we're one of the few professions, and I've worked across industry, if you will, that we are so collaborative in our techniques. And we are so we're very community driven in what we do, and really exchanging, okay, what's a best practice, for establishing this engagement or kicking off this project. And the benefit to that is that we get to learn from each other, but that means too that our clients or our receiving organizations start to learn what to expect, because if they've received a best practice from from a certified, from a certification holder, then there's a certain standard that they know will be met. And so every time we go in, we have an opportunity to represent the profession very well. So that's key. That's very good. Now I know that there's I'll keep joking about you being on the one continent that I haven't visited yet. And I'll make sure that I come. And I mean, you have no idea how badly I want to come to Australia. So this is certainly affirmation that, and I think people will be checking back, Lana, did you make it to Australia? Okay.
Yep.
So here's the funny thing, kind of like your, some of the community speaking that you've done. I've done a lot of speaking in schools, partly because of, being a mom of children. And so volunteering in the schools where I could, but also volunteering, even if they weren't there, if it was a different school, or just being, community minded. And one of the programs that I've delivered, because I'm a petroleum engineer by training, started my career fracking in the oil field. And so I would tell kids about, where oil came from, or, tell them about different types of engineers, or just different, whichever the focus that the teacher wants. Well, one of the things when I talk about, my oil and gas career, is that, I say that, because I'm in Houston, and there's a lot of oil and gas in Houston, but I've been all over the world because there's oil all over the world. And I tell them the only place I haven't been is Antarctica and Australia. In my mind, that's so that they'll remember that I want to go to Australia. Well, inevitably, yes. I have kids asking me, when are you going to Antarctica? Not only am I not going to Antarctica, but if I do, it certainly won't be before I go to Australia. But so one of the things in our industry too is the globalization of project management. What have you find? I know we're beginning to kind of land the plane, if you will, but I want to leave our listeners with some great nuggets on running a global PMO. What kind of what would you like to leave us with on leading a global PMO? What's been your experience?
Yes, so I think one of the things I realized when leading a global PMO for one of Australia's largest banks, we covered a global PMO covers 13 countries. Now, when I say that, people think, oh, how you going to every country every week and being involved in and all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't exactly like that. What it was is we had different regions and different enterprise level PMOs in those areas. It was about going and working out what Asia's PMOs, Pacific, New Zealand and Australia, how they were operating, what they were doing, and how what they did was going to align and integrate with the global head office function that I was leading in Melbourne. And so it was really about going and meeting with the different areas and understanding exactly how they did their accounting and their legal requirements, and how the different GST and VAT and all of these different things that are different by region, and understanding how they were going to play into either contributing beneficially or impacting the project. And it was a global program of work that was funded by an external company because it was their initiative that they wanted to provide their services across all of the banks, all of the banks regions that they were in. And this is why it covered 13 countries. So what we needed to do is really understand what was the structure, what was the governance, what was the project methodology, what were all the factors that we were going to do. And what I found that was quite interesting is there was no way we were going to get all of them to do the same thing. So what we did is we instead agreed a consistent approach on how we would make decisions. We agreed a consistent approach around which points we would go to checkpoints. That doesn't matter how you got there, as long as you got there and this is the decision-making path that you're going to take. How are we going to roll up the financial information? How are we going to make sure the recruitment processes worked and were consistent and the timeframes met? Because, in some parts of, in Pacific, the recruitment timeframes were much longer than, say, maybe in New Zealand. New Zealand was running Agile. Australia was running Waterfall at the time. So it was about bringing all the different paths together and leveraging that in a way that was going to work for the program going forward. And so it was one of the most interesting programs I've ever worked on. And we also measured the results through speaking to stakeholders and actually got the highest result in that bank since they started tracking it through post-implementation reviews. The biggest learnings for me was not about coming in with the hat on and saying, I'm the global PMO manager and you're going to do things my way. No, it was about understanding what was going to be the most streamlined, most efficient, fastest path to the end result, which is what the board was effectively paying us for. So, it's one of those experiences that I relish and I love to talk about. And I think there's a lot of learnings from that I can continue to share in probably in a longer conversation. But hopefully that's been helpful for the listeners for today.
Those are some great nuggets to leave everyone with. I mean, just really how you bring all that together and the variances. So you've had an amazing, I say amazing life. It's not over. You've got so much more to contribute, but your contributions so far have been incredible. I'm glad to have had the opportunity to meet you and to even get to know you more, not just through this interview, but through our interactions. So I appreciate you. I thank you for your time. And I thank PMO Global for nominating you, because this is an exciting time for you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And if I could just say that if there's anyone out there listening that's not having a good day, please know that there is help out there.
Thank you. And that's a great endpoint. Y'all have an awesome day. Y'all from Houston.
Bye-bye.
Bye.